Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you're new to the channel, my name is Rabbi Cass from the SoferCenter.com. If you're not yet subscribed to the channel, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell, so when I make future videos about tefillin or mezuzahs, you'll get notified. Today's video is a video that many of my viewers have been looking forward to for quite some time. In fact, I myself have been looking forward to making this video. It's just taken me several months to gather my thoughts down on paper and to try to get the video together. So the video for today is the third video in the Ultimate Guide to Buying Tefillin, and today's video we're going to be focusing on the Parshios. That's the text, the writing that goes in the inside of the Tefillin. We know that the Tefillin has three components: the Parshios, the Batim, and the Retzuos. I previously already made the two videos, one about the Retzuos, the Tefillin straps, and one about the Batim, the Tefillin boxes, and you can find the link to those videos in the description of this video. So if you haven't watched those videos, you can easily find the link in the description of this video. So check out those videos, and then you'll have the third video right here focusing on the Parshios of the Tefillin. We're going to be talking about the different styles of the writing, the different levels of the writing, what makes one nicer than the other, what goes into the process of writing the Tefillin, where should you buy the Parshios from. We're going to be talking about all of that today. So if you're ready, stay tuned. Here we go. So just before we get started, I think it's important to at least explain briefly what exactly the Tefillin Parshios are, for those who don't know. Inside the Tefillin boxes, there's the text, the sections from the Torah, which are called the Parshios. The Tefillin has written inside on the parchment there's four Parshios from the Torah. Okay, this is the hand Tefillin. I'm showing you this one because you can see each one of the four sections from the Torah that are written by a Sofer with a feather, just like this, on the parchment. This is parchment. Now, the reason why there's these four sections from the Torah is because there's 4 times in the Torah where Hashem commands us to wear the tefillin, and in each one of these sections from the Torah where it mentions the mitzvah of tefillin, it says that we should wear them as a sign upon our arm and as a remembrance or a sign between our eyes. There's different ways that the Torah refers to the mitzvah each time, but that's the idea, is that we should wear these words as a reminder on our arm and between our eyes on our head. So the sign on the arm refers to the hand tefillin. Between our eyes is a reference to the tefillin shel rosh, the tefillin which goes on the head. So the Sofer is writing each letter with a feather on the parchment, and once the parchment is done and rolled, it is inserted into the tefillin boxes just like this. So this is the hand tefillin. It's rolled, and it will go into the box. And obviously, it's wrapped and it's tied with the hair. Right now, I'm just trying to show you the idea of what the Parshios are, and they're going inside the boxes just like this. So this will go into the box like this. Now, the head tefillin is also a similar idea. You have 4 sections from the Torah. Here you can see is the Parsha of Shema, and this is the third Parsha, which goes inside the tefillin. The head tefillin, each one is on its own piece of parchment. Again, it's handwritten by a Sofer with a feather on the parchment. Unlike the hand tefillin, the rosh tefillin, the Parshios, the text is folded, and it's put inside to each one of the compartments in the shel rosh. Has 4 compartments, and each one gets one section of the cloth, the parchment, which goes inside of the bias. And obviously, again, it's wrapped with a matlis and with cyrus. But just to show you the idea is that inside each tefillin box, you have the parsha, the text, which is handwritten by a Sofer. Now, it goes without saying that when the Torah says that we should wear these words as a reminder, the Torah means these words. Which words? These words, the sections of the Torah that mention the mitzvah of tefillin. So you can understand that in order for the writing to say the words in the Torah, the letters have to be clearly legible and easily identified as the intended letter. And this is where you start to run into problems with the lesser expensive and the cheaper tefillin, because they're not written as nice. And when something's not written as nice, or worse, it's written sloppy, then you can have a serious problem with the tefillin being considered kosher, because it wouldn't be the intended word that the Torah says that needs to be there. So for example, just to use the hand tefillin here, the first word of the parsha that goes into the tefillin is vayidaber. So imagine if the Sofer wrote the daled not so neat, and instead of making it a sharp and a proper daled, it was rounded at the back, and now the daled will look just like a resh, so it doesn't say vayidaber anymore. I'm not sure how you would pronounce that word. Definitely wouldn't say vayidaber. And then, of course, the tefillin would not be kosher because it doesn't have the letters that the Torah says need to be there inside the boxes and be worn every single day. So this leads me into the next thing that I want to talk about, is that everybody knows that a Sofer needs to be a Yirei Shomayim, which means somebody who has the fear of heaven, somebody who has an awareness, a consciousness of Hashem. Why is this so important that the Sofer be a Yirei Shomayim? And what is a Yirei Shomayim? So I'm going to answer both of those questions right now. Why is it so important for a Sofer to be a Yirei Shomayim? Like I explained to you how the letters all have to be written perfectly and exact, there's another law which applies to the mitzvah of tefillin. I mean, there are several thousand laws that are necessary for the Sofer to know when it comes to writing the letters for the tefillin. But one of the basic laws is that the writing of the tefillin has to be done in sequence. It has to be written in order. So when you see the word vayidaber over here, it has to say vav, yud, daled, beis, resh. Now, if the Sofer in the previous example which I gave you, instead of making a daled, wrote a resh, and then he only realized when he finished the entire word vayidaber, you can't simply erase this daled, which looks like a resh, and rewrite the daled and then continue on writing, because what happened is now this daled was written after the beis and the resh was here. So the proper way to fix that is to erase the resh, erase the beis, rewrite this daled proper, and then write the beis, and then write the resh again. You know, when you realize your mistake 3 letters later, it's not that big a deal to make the correction. But let's say, you know, even if you go one word further, you have Hashem's name, now that would be a mistake that can't be fixed anymore, because you can't erase Hashem's name and you can't write the daled out of sequence. So now you have this piece of parchment would have to be buried. So that's an expense. The cost of the parchment is not cheap. It does cost a couple of dollars. But think about a much different scenario. Let's say the Sofer didn't realize that they made the mistake until they finished writing all 4 of the sections from the Torah. Now, just like each letter has to be written in sequence, each parsha has to be written in sequence also. So imagine the Sofer didn't realize the mistake until the end. Now, this takes many, many, many hours to write, and we'll get into that more towards the end of the video. But can you imagine the test of faith that this requires, of hours of your week? Hundreds of dollars and perhaps over $1,000 can be at stake from one letter being written incorrectly. So you really have to trust the Sofer who's writing the tefillin, that if they discover a mistake like this, that they're able to withstand the temptation to just make that small correction, and nobody would be the wiser, because to erase that letter and rewrite it, any Sofer that knows how to write also knows how to erase, can simply make that correction, and it will be undetectable to the eye. Even if I was to get that tefillin, this tefillin, a month later to examine it, I wouldn't even think to suspect that this resh was changed into a daled out of sequence. So who would know? The only person who knows is the Sofer, his desk, his lamp, and Hashem. And because of this is so much is at stake, you have to really trust your Sofer. I mean, some of the Sofrim that I buy from, they are so nervous about making a mistake, they actually do a computer examination. They don't wait till they finish writing the entire tefillin to do a computer examination. They do a computer examination after each section that they wrote. So they'll write it, they'll let it dry, they do a computer checking, then they also do a manual check to make sure that it's okay, and then they go further. So that's one of the basic reasons why we say that a Sofer has to be a Yirei Shomayim, because you have to trust them that they're making the tefillin 100% according to halacha and how Hashem wants the tefillin to be made. So I think that should give you just a general idea of why the Sofer has to be Yirei Shomayim, and not just the Sofer who is writing the tefillin, but also the Sofer who is checking the tefillin, and the Sofer who's preparing the tefillin for you, because just like the Sofer can make a mistake like that, either because they don't have Yirei Shomayim, or because they're not knowledgeable in the halachos of what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. We're going to talk about what exactly Yirei Shomayim is in a couple of minutes. But it's not just limited to the Sofer. It also applies to anybody who puts their hands on these tefillin has to be a Yirei Shomayim, because there's so many aspects of, you have to really care and invest yourself in making these tefillin to make sure that they are 100% right. I mean, they could be written properly, but not assembled correctly. Or the person who checks it makes a correction that he wasn't supposed to make. So everybody that is involved in the process of making this tefillin, from when it leaves the Sofer's hand till it gets to your hands, you have to trust every single person along the process of the tefillin. And it basically boils down to the person who you're actually buying the tefillin from, that they trust all the people that were involved in the process of making the tefillin, because it's impossible for you to be in touch with every single person, from the making of the Batim to the Parshios to the assembling it, checking it, and the one doing the computer checking and all these things. You would be surprised how many Sofrim, I'm not even talking about Judaica stores and gift shops, Sofrim sell tefillin that they just skip the computer examination. All of my Sofrim, I make sure they do a computer examination on the Parshios. You'd be surprised. I know, because I know because I've had stories where I buy Parshios from Sofer, and I know that other Sofrim, like I'll call them like myself, who are not writing but are assembling tefillin, buy from the same Sofer tefillin. I make sure that it's computer checked before we do a manual check and before I give it to any one of my clients. But I know some Sofrim who buy from the same Sofrim, and I know that the Sofer doesn't do a computer examination, so that's why I have to do it. They take a shortcut, they don't do it. And I have stories where people give me a tefillin to check, and I say, oh, I recognize this ksav I also get from this Sofer, and I'll find a letter missing, and I'll be like, why didn't they do a computer examination? I mean, that would have found it, right? So it's very important to, you have to trust the Sofer who wrote it. Anybody can make a mistake, anybody can miss a word or a letter. That's possible. There's distractions today. Nobody's perfect. But that's why you also have to trust the Sofer who's preparing it for you. They're doing a computer examination. They're making sure it's checked over by another Sofer, not by the Sofer who wrote it, because a Sofer can't find his own faults. It has to be somebody, an independent Sofer who's checking and wants to make sure that the tefillin are perfect. You have to have somebody overseeing the process of putting the Parshios into the Batim, making sure they're wrapped properly, making sure they're putting in properly, making sure that the Parshios not put into the Batim too tight, that would squish it and eventually hurt or ruin the Parshios. Painting the Batim, sanding the Batim, making sure the Batim aren't getting ruining the squareness of the tefillin. Basics, things like measuring Batim, making sure that they're ribua and that it's being done by somebody who has experience, knows what they're doing. These are all things which fall into my domain as the one who's assembling and preparing the tefillin. And I need to make sure, and you have to make sure, that the person you're buying the tefillin from is making sure that everything is done 100% according to halacha. If you walk into a Judaica store to buy a pair of tefillin, so there's a lot of barriers between the store clerk and the manager, the one that does the orders, the Judaica supplier that supplies the tefillin, and in most cases, the tefillin comes to the Judaica store already assembled, and then just marking it up and passing it on to the customer. They don't know what's inside over there. They don't know who wrote it. They don't know what style the writing is. They're selling the pair of tefillin like any other Judaica item, like a menorah, for example. It doesn't take much for a menorah to be kosher. If it has a scratch or a ding on it or something, is not 100% perfect, it still fulfills the mitzvah. It's still kosher. A tefillin, however, as you are starting to get the idea, I hope, and you definitely will have the idea as we finish this video, tefillin are much more, if you watch all the series of my guide to buying tefillin, you will understand that tefillin has to be much more, there's much more that can go wrong throughout the process of making a pair of tefillin. And you really have to have proper oversight, and you have to make sure that the person that's providing it with you knows what's going on, knows where it came from, understands your needs, what you need, and is able to provide that with you, because they themselves understand what goes into the process of making a pair of tefillin, which a store clerk cannot provide that for you. You also have to make sure that the person you're buying it from will stand behind their product. That something happens down the road with the tefillin, that they're going to stand behind the product and be able to help you with it and take care of it, and not just stonewall you. So, now that we know why the Sofer and everybody involved in the process of making the tefillin has to be a Yirei Shomayim, and that's in order to make sure that we do it the right way, what is a Yirei Shomayim? How do you define Yirei Shomayim? Sometimes I have people, they come into the office and they look at me in the eyes and they say, are you a Yirei Shomayim? And I look at them and I smile because, like I'll explain soon, Yirei Shomayim is something which is very difficult to, put your finger on and say, oh, that makes you a Yirei Shomayim. and especially to judge your own level of Yirei Shomayim. I mean, how do you judge your own level of Yirei Shomayim? Everybody's biased. So I always just, I shrug my shoulders and I laugh and I say, well, Yirei Shomayim, I'm working on it. I'm doing my best. I can't, I like to joke. One thing's for sure, I'm an unav. I'm a humble person. That's for sure. In most cases, they smile and they understand the point, and we go further with the buying of the tefillin or the mezuzahs. But it is a good question. What is a Yirei Shomayim? I mean, how do you define Yirei Shomayim? So there's a story that I was told by an older Sofer here in Muncie who heard from the Sofer who taught him Sofer. So this story probably goes back, I don't know, maybe 50, 70 years, let's say. They give you his Sofer gave him a scenario. He said, imagine you have two Sofrim writing a parsha. Now one Sofer he's older, he has a long white beard, and he's been writing for many, many years, and he is known for his level of saintliness and holiness, and everybody just, that Sofer is he's a real holy person. But his writing is not such a beautiful writing. It lacks a little bit in the writing, but he's known for Yirei Shomayim. He's super holy. And then you have another Sofer, let's say a younger Sofer. His beard is not as white, it's not as long. He knows the halachos, he writes well, and his ksav is a nicer writing. Both of these Parshios are selling for the same price. Which one do you take? So the average person, I've presented this scenario to people on many occasions, and they almost always tell me, they say, well, I would go with the Sofer who has the long white beard and is super holy. And the answer is, that's the incorrect answer. The answer is, you're supposed to go with the nicer writing, the writing that's more accurate and follows the halacha more closely. Why is that? Because how can you judge another person's level of Yirei Shomayim? Are you judging them externally based on how long their beard is? When I provided you with this scenario of one Sofer with a big white beard and one Sofer with a short brown beard, maybe a couple of white hairs. No, I'm not talking about me. We never said that he wasn't Shomer Torah mitzvahs. We never said that he wasn't doing everything that he was supposed to be doing. We just said he didn't have a long white beard. You can't be the judge on what's going on inside somebody's head, what's going on behind closed doors. So how do you judge? So what do you do? So you take the nicer writing. That's what we could judge. We could judge the nicer writing. So when we talk about Yirei Shomayim, there's only a couple things that we could, base our decision on. Is this Sofer a Yirei Shomayim? And it's three things that I basically boil it down to. One, the Sofer has to be certified. He has to have Kabbalah. The Kabbalah assures you that he has certification, that he learned all of the laws, the thousands of laws, the Svarim, the halachos, on how the tefillin have to be written, and everything that goes into the assembly and properly making the tefillin. How do we know they know the laws? By having the Kabbalah, that they were tested, they were vetted, and we know that they know, at least we know that they know what they're supposed to be doing. How do we know that they are actually doing what they're doing? So that's when the second thing comes into play. You have to make sure that the Sofer that you're buying the tefillin from, or the Sofer that's assembling the tefillin for you, and you're trusting him that he knows the Sofer that he's buying the tefillin, the Parshios from, that he knows him well enough, and he knows his motivation, and he knows what is he involved in. Is his attitude, oh, I'm writing this for the money, or is his attitude, I'm writing this because I want to bring down Hashem's brachos into the world through my tefillin, through my writing, and he puts his heart and soul into the writing. What's his attitude? What's his intentions? How well do you know the Sofer? If his attitudes and his intentions are correct, and that's lined up with the fact that he knows all of the halachos and all the laws, then you can be that much more sure that the parshas were written according to halacha, that they're proper, that they're right, that they're kosher. The third thing you can look at is the actual writing itself. You could have somebody who writes a beautiful writing and not have the correct intentions, or if they don't know the laws, they could be writing beautifully and still be making mistakes and correcting things that they don't know that they're allowed to correct. But one thing's for sure, if somebody is writing sloppy, if somebody's writing a writing, like I'll show you in a couple minutes, which is written improper, not kosher, you can be sure that the other two aspects, that they know the halahs, the certification, the Kabbalah, and that their intentions are in the right place, you can be sure that they're missing that. It reminds me of a story I heard of from a Sofer here in Muncie. He says that when he was learning Safras, when he was younger in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem, He was by the kotel. He walked into a judaica store or a gift shop somewhere near the kotel, and he was learning to become a sofer himself, and he saw that they had mezuzah scrolls on display over there, and he looked at the mezuzahs in the display case, and he was looking at the mezuzahs, comparing from what he knows from writing it to what he sees, and he saw that the mezuzah, the sofer, when it came to the final mem, which is a very boxy letter, it's like a square, the sofer who wrote these scrolls wrote the bottom very round, so they actually looked like a samach. They were more rounded at the bottom as opposed to square. And he goes to the store clerk and he says, these mezuzahs are not kosher. They're supposed to be a final mem, which is a square at the bottom, flat, and the bottoms are very round. You can't be selling this. The store clerk says to him, actually, the sofer who writes these, he's actually coming by today to bring us some more mezuzot. He'll be coming in a couple minutes. Why don't you wait? When he comes, you could talk to him. The sofer comes in. He explains to him what his concern is with the mezuzot that he's writing. The sofer looks at him and he says, "What do you mean? Every single morning I daven by the kotel. Every single day I daven by the kotel. How can you say that what I'm writing, my mezuzot, are not kosher?" And this is what I'm trying to bring out. Part of Yirei Shomayim is writing proper. You can't say that I fear heaven and I'm doing what Hashem wants if you're not writing the Parshios according to the way Hashem wants that the Parshios, the letters, need to be written. Okay, so we have to have all these three things in order to be sure that the sofer is how we can define that a sofer is Yirei Shomayim. 1, he knows the halachos. 2, his intentions, his kavanah. He lives his life in a style that follows in the ways of Hashem. And 3, that his writing is according to halacha. Missing any one of those things is a recipe for disaster. And that would, as best as we can define Yirei Shomayim, because like I said, we can't know what's going on in a sofer's head. We don't know what's going on behind closed doors. And we can't attach a camera to the back of the sofer to follow him every step that he goes. What we can judge is what we can see. And that's what we have to go by. Okay, so what are the 4 styles of writing? The 4 styles of writing are Ksav Beis Yosef. That's the first one. You can see it right here on the screen. That's used by people who daven Nusach Ashkenaz, who consider themselves Litvish or Litvaks. That's the Ksav that they'll use, Ksav Beis Yosef. The second Ksav is Ksav Arizal, or also known as Ksav Ari. That's worn by Chassidim. You can see it here on the screen. That's worn by Chassidim. All Chassidim, including Chabad Chassidim. There are some Chassidim who would use Ksav Beis Yosef, but the vast majority of Chassidim, those who daven Nusach Sfard and Nusach Arizal, but consider themselves a Chassid, would wear Ksav Ari. The third style writing, as you can see here on the screen, is Ksav Sfard. That's worn by Sephardim. So if you're Sephardi, you'll want to be looking for tefillin written according to the Sephardi or Velish writing. And then the fourth writing is Ksav Chabad, which is worn by many Chabad Chassidim. I'm not going to go in this video to explain the difference between each one of the writings and explain why some Chabad wear what's called Ksav Chabad. Maybe we'll have to save that for another video. But those are, generally speaking, those are the 4 styles of writing and who would typically wear those writings. Now, it's important to realize that one Ksav is not better than the other. Sometimes I have people ask me, is Arizal better than Beis Yosef? Or is Beis Yosef better than Sfard? It's not better or worse. Look at the styles of the writing as just a font. On the computer, when you're in Word, you can choose different styles of writing. That's all it is. So imagine if you're trying to handwrite a certain font, one font is not necessarily better than the other. It's what's right for you. Now, once you find which Ksav is right for you, everybody's handwriting is different. One sofer has a very sloppy handwriting, and one sofer can have a beautiful handwriting. And we're going to be talking about this more. What does a sloppy handwriting mean? And what exactly does that entail? And what is a beautiful writing? What does that mean? But, I have sometimes people, they have a beautiful, beautiful Beis Yosef tefillin, but, they're a chassid and they want to have Ksav Ari, and they're ready to buy a new pair of Ksav Ari, but the pair that they're willing to buy is not nearly as nice as the Beis Yosef writing that they have. So I will encourage them to say, listen, if you want to change the tefillin, you have to at least get as nice as the Beis Yosef that you have currently, or just leave it alone, because the style of the writing is less important than the level, the beautifulness, and the kosherness of the writing. Okay, so don't think that one ksav is better than the other. It's what's the ksav that's right for you, and in each ksav you have different varying levels of hider, how beautiful it is, how neat it is, and how nice it is. The next thing I want to talk about is the size of the parshios. So it's really not something that's that complicated, and it's really quite simple. Assuming you know what size tefillin you want, either a 35 for standard, 34, 35 standard size batim, or if you want Chabad batim, if you're Chabad, then the Parshios which you choose will likely be written according to the size of the batim. Alter Rebbe's Ksav is a larger parsha, which is typically associated with larger batim. So Alter Rebbe's Ksav, it might be harder to find, or a Sofer that's willing to write smaller, so that it could fit in a standard size 34, 35 batim. Smaller size Parshios will definitely fit in the larger size batim. So size of the Parshios is not really something you have to bring up when you're purchasing the tefillin, unless you're looking to get a really smaller size pair of tefillin. Then you may have to take that into consideration, because like I in my experience, I think I mentioned this in the video with the Batim, the smallest size Batim that could fit a standard size Parsha is a size 28 millimeter Batim. But I do have to say this with some reservation, because one of the things that you'll find that there's the differentiation between the more expensive Parshios and the lesser expensive Parshios, it's the beautifulness of the writing and how much care and attention to detail. But it is also the parchment that they're writing on. So like my more expensive Parshios are usually writing on a more expensive cloth. It's a little bit thinner, it's a little bit nicer, versus the lesser expensive Parsha. It's very well written, but the cloth that the Sofer uses could sometimes be a little bit thicker, and then it has difficulty fitting into the 28 millimeter Batim. Depends which Batim. Each Batim, if it's off by like 1/10 of a millimeter, that's sometimes all the difference it can make, because I will not squish Parshios inside the Batim. So, standard size Parshios could almost always fit in size 28 millimeter Batim, and I can provide that for you if you want. We can do that. Smaller than size 28 millimeter Batim would require a really, really small Parsha to be written, and that's not something that I'm able to provide. And the reason is simply because it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to write really, really small and still write them according to halacha 100%, according to each sofer according to their standards. The sofer that write for me, I've asked them to write for me on more than one occasion small parshios to fit in the teensy, like what's called the pitzponim, the really, really small, like the 22 millimeter Batim, and they simply tell me that they can't, because the only way that they could write that small is if they compromise on the standards that they're writing, and they can't do it. They're not willing to do it. And every now and then I do get such small Batim for checking, and the parshios that are inside are compromised in the beauty, and sometimes some aspects in halacha that are required to be there, and they're like at best minimally kosher. So and it will cost quite a bit more, because to write so small is very difficult. So it will cost a lot, and the quality of the parsha won't even be as great as a parsha half the cost of that. Let's say it's $1,000 for nice parshios, so it'll cost you $2,000 for the small ones, and the small ones will not be as nice as the $1,000 parshios, because they're smaller and they have to compromise on certain detail of the letter in order to be able to write it. So you just have to keep that in mind, that first of all, if you do want to get such small tefillin and parshios written that small, that's not something that I could provide for you. And if you are able to find somebody that's going to provide it for you, in most cases, it could be there's an exception to the rule. I'm not saying I've met every single sofer out there, but in most cases, you're going to be compromising on the quality of the writing, the niceness and the kosherness of the writing, in order to accommodate the small size tefillin which you want. And that's something you have to just figure out yourself, if that's something that you're okay with, if that's something that you want to do, if it's worth it for you to fulfill the mitzvah on a more basic or minimally kosher level, in order to have a smaller pair of tefillin. That's something you have to make a decision on your own. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is the quality of the tefillin. Now, when I say quality of the tefillin, I don't mean how durable it is or how long it's going to last. I mean, how nice is the actual writing? What's the level, the quality of the writing? Now, this is very important, because from the three components of the tefillin, the one that will affect the price the greatest will be the actual text, the writing of the parsha. And the reason for that is because it's the most labor intensive. It's the one that takes the most time. You could have two pairs of tefillin which are equal with the same Batim and the same Retzuos, the same straps, the same boxes, yet one could easily be $1,000 more. And the reason for that difference is because of what text is actually put inside the Batim. What level writing is it? How nice is it? Did the Sofer write slow and beautiful with all the detail that Shulchan Aruch requires, and therefore it took him quite some time, and he has to be compensated for his time? so it's a more expensive parsha? Or was it a parsha which was written quicker, and a lot of detail was left out, and because it was written quicker, it sells for less. It's a cheaper parsha, right? So it's a trade-off: how nice it is and how much it's going to cost. You can't have both. If it's beautiful, it's going to cost a lot because the Sofer took a longer time to write it. And if it's not as beautiful, it was written quicker, it's going to be a cheaper parsha. That's just the way it is. Now, in these levels of how nice it is, there are actually different categories where they will fall into. I like to categorize the writing into 3 categories. The first is Bedieved, which means minimally kosher. The next one is Lechatchila, which means preferably, the way Shulchan Aruch says that it should be, preferably kosher. And then you have what's called Mehudar, and I'll explain what exactly Mehudar means in a moment. But these are terms which Shulchan Aruch defines, and you have to. One of the reasons why it's so important to make sure you know who you're buying your tefillin from is because you want to make sure that their definition of, minimally kosher and preferably kosher lines up with how Shulchan Aruch says, what minimally kosher and preferably kosher is. Because, I've seen these terms translated very, very, very loosely. When people say yes, it's 100% fine, and I see what they sold, and it's missing certain crowns and certain detail that the Shulchan Aruch says needs to be there. So I don't understand how that's perfectly fine, and that's not considered minimally kosher. So you have to. It's one of the reasons why it's important to know where you're buying the tefillin from. You need to know what you're asking for, and they have to know what Shulchan Aruch says. The only way they could properly understand what you're asking for is if they themselves know what Shulchan Aruch says, and they could actually provide you with that. This is why I'm making this video. And I will explain what exactly is I'll give you some ideas on how you could determine one level writing from another. But you have to make sure who you're buying them from knows what you're talking about. If you walk into a Judaica store, chances are they don't know what you're talking about when you say you want a beautiful tefillin, or they say tefillin's a tefillin. But there is a real difference, and hopefully through the course of this video, I'll be able to explain that to you exactly what that is. So. Bedieved, Lechatchila, these are terms which Shulchan Aruch uses to describe the writing of the letters. But what is a Mehudar Tefillin? How do you define Mehudar? So the term Mehudar, you don't actually find it in Shulchan Aruch that's something which is called Mehudar. But I want to read to you the first sif in Siman Lamed Vav of Shulchan Aruch, and I'll translate it also. And this is how I define Mehudar. Lechatchila tzarech lichteiv ksiva tama ushlema, which means that by initial preference, you need to write a script that is perfectly and faithfully follows Betunas ha'aisiyas, the shapes of the letters, Shalamduha midivrei haTalmud, which are derived from the Talmud, Umidrashim, and the Medrash, the Kabbalah miharishonim, and the oral tradition received from the sages of early generations. And then Shulchan Aruch goes on to say that if you deviate from those exact descriptions, it's not possible unless it totally loses the shape of the letters. So the way I define Lechatchila, so technically speaking, if you have a Lechatchila writing, if you're writing, the parsha that you're purchasing fulfills all the things that Shulchan Aruch says Lechatchila should be there, from the Medrash, from the Gemara, from everything that Shulchan Aruch describes, that's considered Mehudar. That is Mehudar. Yet you will still find you could have a writing which is written with all of the detail that Shulchan Aruch needs to be there, but it's just not pleasing to the eye to look at. The letters are not symmetrical. It's not exactly lined up so beautiful. There's a lot of stretching in the letters, and I'll show you some of the things that you can look for to see, what's that next level up. Like a definition I make is there's Mehudar lahalacha, and then there's Mehudar like aesthetic beauty. Is this writing halachically Mehudar, or is it aesthetically beautiful? Because that's the next level up. You have a writing which is Bedieved, which means it's minimally kosher. It's missing crowns, it's missing kaitzim, it's missing details that Shulchan Aruch says it needs to have. Then you have a writing which has all the detail, that's written properly. That's considered Mehudar according to halacha. It's nice. It has everything it needs to have, but it may not be the most beautiful writing. And then you have writing which is more beautiful and more symmetrical and more just, when you look at it, it's like, oh my gosh, like somebody put their heart and soul into this. Because you could have, Lechatchila, a nicer writing which is written quicker, and it's just, yes, it's 100%, but it's just not as beautiful. And when I show you the examples, you'll understand yourself exactly what I'm talking about. So again, just to recap, these 3 levels is Bedieved, which means it's minimally kosher, and yeah, I'll talk more about that in a second. And then Lechatchila, which is how Shulchan Aruch defines how the letters should properly be written, which would also be technically considered Mehudar. And then you have what's called beautiful. It's just written beautiful. Of course, it has everything Shulchan Aruch says needs to have, and it's just the Sofer took the time to write it slow, and he put all his effort into it and his kavanah into it, and you can see how the spacing of the letters is very equal, and the letters are symmetrical, and the letters are, everything's just more beautiful. And in that level of Mehudar, after Lechatchila, the higher level, there are so many different levels. You can just go up and up and up and up and up till it's so beautiful that it's gorgeous. And like I talked about in my introduction video for the Tefillin, the nicer the parsha gets, typically speaking, the longer the line is going to be, for people that want to buy his Parshios, and of course the more it's going to cost. I do carry all kinds of Parshios. I try to stock them. I order them years in advance in order to have it. Somebody just ordered a Tefillin from me this week. He said the bar mitzvah was in May, and he wanted the top Parsha, which typically takes a year. But lucky him, I don't have them in stock now, but I ordered these Parshios from the Sofer already several months back, and I have another one ordered after this one, and I told him I'm going to have the Parsha by Purim, because he needs them after Passover, Pesach. I said, don't worry, we'll have it in time. And he was like, wow, how do you do that? Because I think ahead. So, that's just don't worry. So like I'm saying, it is, if you need something written beautiful and you want something nice, I probably have it for you in stock, or I will have it within the next month or 2 or 3, because I'm constantly ordering. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. Now I'm going to show you some of the samples of the actual writing, so you can see for yourself what exactly I'm talking about. Okay, so let's do it like this. Let's try to zoom in a little bit. I don't know how well it's going to be, how clear it's going to be. Okay, 1 second. Okay, so let's focus on the top parsha here. Believe it or not, this was actually inside of a pair of tefillin. Scares me to death that people could actually make a pair of tefillin like this. What do I have to say about this parsha? If that's supposed to be a chaf, okay? That's supposed to be a lamed. That's supposed to be a nun. Looks more like a vav. Okay. What do I see here? It's hard to look through the camera. I mean, oh look, that's supposed to be a mem, be'im. It's a samach. I mean, this is just so terribly written. Look at that aleph. When you buy a pair of tefillin on eBay and Amazon, this is what you're getting. For $320 or $250, this is what you're getting. It may not be this exact writing. It's going to be it's going to be another version of this. Oh, look at that. That's a daled. Well done. Yeah, okay. So that's why we don't buy tefillin on eBay and Amazon or anywhere, or gift shops and synagogues or things like that, because you understand that in order for a pair of tefillin to be kosher, it has to have the words that the Torah says it needs to have. Like I spoke about in the beginning of the video, in order for a tefillin to be kosher, it has to have the 4 sections of the Torah that mention the mitzvah of tefillin. And when you look at this parsha, it clearly does not have the sections of the Torah written there, because you can't even read. It's not even legible. You can't read the letters. Not 8 out of 10 letters, you can't read them. It's not legible. Okay, the spacing is terrible. The letters, you just can't read them. So how is this wearing the words that from the parsha of the Torah that the Torah says you need to have and wear every single day in your hand? You're not wearing them because these are not words from the Torah. Okay, these are not the verses from the Torah. Now, the next level here, which I'm showing you right now, this is a typical tefillin which you will find in a Judaica store. And unfortunately, even by some Sofrim who want to sell a lesser expensive option, a cheaper pair of tefillin, I know that tefillin is expensive, and I'm gonna talk about that more at the end of the video. Different ways to save money on the tefillin, and different ideas that you can, hopefully take into consideration to help make the tefillin purchase more affordable. But the solution to having an affordable pair of tefillin is not to have a non-kosher pair of tefillin. Having a non-kosher pair of tefillin is not the solution. So if we're going to be wearing tefillin, we want to make sure that we're wearing tefillin which are 100% kosher, right? What do they say? They say 90 to 99% kosher is 100% puzzle. So just to now look at this over here. You can read the letters over here on this tefillin, on this parsha. You will notice that if you look throughout, it's missing the crowns in several of the places. Okay, so you'll see here, like you look, this nun is missing the crowns. It needs to have 3 crowns. But that's not a big deal. I said the term Bedieved before. Bedieved, if a parsha is missing the crowns, it would still be considered kosher. But what's going on in this tefillin is stuff more severe. Things like, oh, look, that nun is touching into that shin. I know I saw a really big problem on this parsha. This is one that somebody brought in a couple weeks ago. Where is it? Oh, here. Here it is. Okay, sorry. Look at this. You see this daled? You see, this is supposed to be Adam. This is supposed to be a daled also. Look at the way the Sofer made the daleds. They don't have a proper akev, which points out. Look at this one also. Another one, Adam here. It almost looks like a resh. This one looks like more like a daled, but this one looks almost complete. This one is basic. It's a kosher resh. So like one of the things when I open up a pair of tefillin, somebody gives me to check, and I start seeing letters. Like if I see a daled like this over here, I'll tell the person. I'll say, like, I know if I check this, I'm going to find a daled that's going to be a kosher resh, because the Sofer was so not careful in how he wrote, or he wrote so fast that he just wasn't really careful, and one of them is going to be messed up really bad. Look, that one didn't. That one just blobbed right over. Okay, this one's not perfect either. I'll show you what a perfect daled is supposed to look like. But none of these are made properly. So that's like that kind of stuff. So yeah, it could have 99 dollars made right, but if one is made wrong, the whole tefillin is not kosher. It makes no difference. I saw another one here. Look at this. Getting a little bit of glare from the light over here. Look at this. The hay bumping into the yud. So that's a very, very thick connection. When you're buying a lesser expensive parsha, either a tefillin from a Judaica store or from a Sofer who's charging a very, very low price for a pair of tefillin, this is what you're getting. There's I have a rabbi that I ask and he questions to, and he says that there's no such thing as a good deal on a pair of tefillin. You get what you pay for. So, just keep that in mind. This could be okay for you. You could say, like, whatever. I have sometimes people, they tell me I'm okay with, an empty mezuzah case. As long as I have the case on the door, I'm fine. I obviously can't agree with that, but, I can tell people what to do. If this is something that you're okay with, that it's mostly kosher, you're not holding yet to understand and appreciate what a kosher pair of tefillin is, then, I don't have anything what to say. But if you want to do the tefillin properly and you want to have a properly written kosher tefillin, then things like letters not touching into each other, like over here, and things like letters being written improperly, that's what you're going to find in an inexpensive pair of tefillin. I have a video where I talk about buying tefillin. I think it was one of our first YouTube videos, buying tefillin on eBay and Amazon. And I show very clearly over there and I explain what's going on over there. And I'll put a link for that video in the description of this video. But don't kid yourself. When you're buying an inexpensive pair of tefillin, this is what you're getting, and if that's what you want, that's fine. But if that's not what you want, then you have to look to buy a pair of tefillin from a Sofer, somebody who you know and you trust is going to give you a proper pair of tefillin, and it's going to cost it's going to cost money, but I'll talk more about this towards the end of the video. But a pair of tefillin is something that you buy once in your life, and it's proper to invest in it. Okay, so now let's go up to the next level of the tefillin. Okay, sorry. So you'll notice here that the parshas which I'm showing you in these videos are all ksav Beis Yosef. I sell a lot of Beis Yosef tefillin, and I just figured I'm going to put this tefillin parsha on the board in order to show you what the tefillin are. So right here, what you're seeing here is my basic, what I call Lechatchila. It's a beautiful pair of tefillin. This pair of tefillin right over here. It's Lechatchila, 100%. Every detail, one of the things that Shulchan Aruch says Lechatchila needs to have is, like I think I might have mentioned earlier, but it's the crowns on top of the lamed. It needs to have the 2 crowns on top of the lamed. So you'll see here in the lameds, they have the 2 crowns on top of the lamed. The right one higher than the left. The writing is written well. It could be spaced a little bit better, but it's a very, very nice writing. And this is 100% Lechatchila, and it is Mehudar. Now, does that mean that there isn't anything nicer? No, of course there is nicer. But this is an example of something that's written 100% Lechatchila. All the letters are written properly. If you look at the dalids, they are all very, very clearly defined. Let me see if I can point to you a dalid over here. Very, very clearly defined. Every single letter, the resh is a resh, the dalid is a dalid. None of the letters are touching. All of the letters have the crowns. It's a properly written pair of tefillin. This is called a nice Mehudar pair of tefillin. Okay? Now, let me show you something that would be considered a little bit nicer. Something a little bit, what I'll call a little bit more Mehudar. Not because it has more detail that Shulchan Aruch says it needs to have. It's more Mehudar because the actual writing is just, it's nicer, it's more beautiful. Now look at the next parsha here. I have to make myself a little bit of room. So this is a parsha which is 1 level up. Okay, this is I think on my website I have it as Mehudar number 2. I think this one was number 3. This one's number 3, I think, and this one's number 2. This is already a more beautiful parsha. The spacing of the letters, the actual letters themselves are more consistent one to the next. It's just more nicely. It's nicer. It's more nicely written. Okay, so again, every detail that it needs to have is there. It's just a nicer, more beautiful written, parsha. The Sofer has a couple years. He actually does have a couple more years experience, and he just has a more beautiful writing. So again, that's a parsha which is more beautiful. And then now I'll show you another parsha which is even nicer than this one, which I consider number 1 on my website, which is written by a very, 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 very fine Sofer, very chashuv Sofer. Let me make a little bit of room over here. I'll move the board just so you can get an idea of something that will be even nicer. So what makes this one that much nicer is you can almost, if you look at the letters, they are so much more consistent, and they're just, the proper way to write a beautiful parsha is that each letter should almost be a symmetrical box. So like if you look at this bays, for example, the space in between the top and the bottom the white is almost just as perfect as the black on the top and the bottom. This just adds to the beauty of the actual writing. Okay, so it's like what we call 3 by 3. The letter, or the tip of a feather is called a kummas, so it's 3 kummas in wide, 3 kummas in tall, and 3 kummas wide. Look at this chaf. It's exactly 3 widths of a feather tip wide and 3 high. The resh also. It's a very consistent and a very, very beautiful ksav. And I know if what I'm explaining to you right now seems like I'm splitting hairs, then you're right. I am splitting hairs, because these are both, the truth is all 3 of them are really beautiful writing. So one other thing I just want to point out before I go on to talking further about the Tefillin Parshios is that between these 2 level Parshios over here, the least expensive one that I sell over here, and the one which you'll find in a Judaica store, you will find sometimes, even if this parsha wasn't puzzled outright because of the letters misshapen and the letters touching, like I showed you over there, the way this is written very poorly. I mentioned that it's missing the crowns over there, which would only make it minimally kosher. But there's other aspects of this that if you look at, you'll see, like for example, this lamed with a very short head. That is also a very serious concern. If you look at the way the crowns are made, they're made like we call the pitchfork tagim. Look like the sticks. They don't have the bollies that the tagim are required to have on the top of each one of the crowns. It doesn't have the bollies on it. It's just the sticks. So that's another thing, a shortcut that the Sofer took in order to make the tefillin writing faster. He didn't put the balls on top of the tagim. This is something which is brought down in Shulchan Aruch, why it needs to be so. Not to go into it right now, but what I'm trying to bring out over here is, writing fast has its consequences. Writing fast and taking shortcuts will leave you with a tefillin which is at best minimally kosher, at worst outright puzzle. Okay, so I can go on and on and on, explain to you different details which are left out and things and how the quality of the writing is compromised, but I think that you get the point. So I hope that by me showing you the different writings and levels of the writing, or quality as we called it, it gave you a better understanding of what I'm talking about when I say, minimally kosher, better kosher, and more beautiful and less beautiful. When I first thought to open my store, my business, Sofer Center, I was going through a lot of different names as to what to call the business. I had to register and everything. And one of the names that I thought about was Superior Stam, because when I got into Safras and I saw a lot of the low quality tefillin and mezuzahs that was out there, I just wanted to, in my mind, I was going to be better and sell better. And Superior Stam was very appealing to me because, all the stam, which is stam, is Sefer Torah, Tefillin, and Mezuzahs. It's an acronym for Sefer Torah, Tefillin, and Mezuzahs. So Superior Stam is like, the best. And I was talking about this with a friend of mine. I was saying, I want to give it a name, Superior Stam. And he said that Superior Stam implies that what you're selling, your Tefillin and Mezuzahs, are like amazing, better than standard. And he said, you're not selling better than standard. He says, most of the tefillin and mezuzahs that you find out there in the world, in eBay, Amazon, synagogue gift shops, he says, those are inferior. He says, if you call yourself superior, then people are just going to think that, he's selling for the elite. When in truth, what I'm selling is what everybody needs to have. I'm not selling superior stam. I'm selling regular stam. I'm selling regular tefillin mezuzahs, what everybody needs to have, which is kosher and beautiful. If I called myself superior, I was saying that, what everybody else is selling in the Judaica stores and Amazon, eBay, that's good, but mine's better. No, mine's good, and what else I'm showing you is inferior, and it's a problem. It's not kosher. So that was one of the reasons why we didn't go with that name of Superior Stam, because this is the way it's supposed to be. I'm not selling superior. I'm selling the way Hashem intended it should be, and which is proper tefillin and mezuzahs. One of the questions I get asked once in a while is, why are tefillin so expensive? It's kind of a hard question to answer, because knowing what I know, and as a sofer that wrote many years myself, we don't, as a sofer, it's a quite, when I have a bar mitzvah boy, when you buy a pair of tefillin from me, I have the bar mitzvah boy come in and actually, when he comes to pick up the pair of tefillin, I have a sefer, a book that goes through the entire making of tefillin with pictures and everything. I showed it in some of my other videos of the Batim and things like that. And I go through the book with the bar mitzvah boy and the father from A to Z, what goes into making the tefillin. So many times they'll look at me and they'll say like, oh my gosh, I never realized how much work and how much effort goes into making the tefillin, from the straps to the boxes and to the writing. I mean, like, that's a lot of writing, and it's so small, and they write it with a feather. They really write it with a feather, like a real feather. Like, how is the tefillin so inexpensive? And like, that's why I say it's a hard question to answer, because a sofer is not one to become wealthy. There's actually Gemara written about it, and people like to quote the Gemara to me, like, I know it, don't worry, I've seen it. Sofer aren't writing to be wealthy. A sofer is writing because they have such a deep connection to Hashem, and they want to be able to provide tefillin and mezuzahs to Jews, Yidden. Now, no sofer is becoming rich from writing. Yet, me as the in-between, one of the reasons why I stopped writing was because I was getting, Baruch Hashem, very, very busy. And then I had people who wanted Ksav Beis Yosef, some people wanted Arizal, some people wanted Sfar. Then I can't write every style of writing. So I ended up having to reach out and work with other Sofrim. But again, I'm very particular of who I buy my Parshios from. And I don't have the luxury to be able to write anymore. I have dreams. I have dreams that one day, maybe when I retire, I'll be able to write again. But as of now, I'm not writing, but I wrote myself for many, many years, and I know how difficult it is to write. And, people just don't realize how many hours go into writing a pair of tefillin and how much effort it takes. One of the Sofer who works with me, he's not 40 years old. He has carpal tunnel in his hand. That's something that he has to deal with. You can't write straight, 50 hours a week or 40 hours a week. You can't, because you'll hurt your body. It's very monotonous work in a sense that your fingers are clenched like this. I'm a lefty. Fingers are clenched like this for 10 hours a day. It's very strenuous, very difficult work. Just to put things into perspective, and again I'm focusing on the writing over here. If a good properly written set of Parshios takes a Sofer between 12 and 15 hours to write the Parshios. A beautiful tefillin, the Sofer who writes the nicest Parshios for me, it takes him on average about 30 hours. 30 hours to write a set of tefillin, the Parshios. If you think about it, if you were to have any other professional in any other field taking the same amount of time that it takes the Sofer to write a pair of tefillin, let's say you had your accountant. Let's say your accountant knew how to write a pair of tefillin. If your accountant was going to write a pair of tefillin, that pair of tefillin, if it was a okay pair of tefillin, like a good pair of tefillin, would probably cost between $2,000 and $3,000. And if it was not tefillin, Parshios, the Parshios would cost between $2,000 and $3,000. And if it was a beautiful Mehudar pair of tefillin that took 25 to 30 hours to write, you're talking about $5,000-$6,000 just for the writing, just for the writing. You would still need Batim, and you would still need the Retzuos on top of that. So when I get asked why is tefillin expensive, it's usually people coming from the mindset that in Judaica stores you can get them for a couple $100. What's the difference one for the next? And the reason why it's a difficult question to answer is because you can't answer it on one foot, because you have to understand what goes into the process in the making of the tefillin and why one tefillin is different from the other. And this is my life's mission, to educate people and to teach people and encourage people to want and to understand the importance of having a proper, and if they're lucky, a beautiful kosher pair of tefillin. So, like everything, it's perspective. So why should you want to have Mehudar Tefillin? Sometimes people, they'll tell me, they say, a Megillah, I understand. A Torah, I understand. It's brought into the shul, into the synagogue. People see it, they wow, this is so beautiful, so nice. But a tefillin, it's rolled up, it's folded, it's put inside the boxes. A mezuzah, it's rolled up, it's put inside the case. Nobody sees it. Why does it matter how nice it is? And it's a great question. But you can ask that question about any mitzvah. About any mitzvah, why should you beautify the mitzvah? Why should you want to make a mitzvah nicer? I'll give you an example. Imagine your spouse or your mother ask you for a favor. I give the example about peeling potatoes because it's an easy one. Please, can you peel some potatoes for me? I'm going to make a potato kugel. Sure, I'll peel the potatoes for you. You peel them, and you leave the peels all over the floor, and you leave the potatoes on the table. And she turns around, she says, "Where's the potatoes?" And she sees the mess, and she sees the potatoes are all turning brown because you left them out there. The other way to do this is to, when you peel the potatoes, you take the peels, you put them in the garbage, you fill up a bucket of water, you put potatoes in the water so they don't turn brown. Which one of these scenarios do you think expresses more love to whoever is asking you to do this favor for them? Did you do it? Yes, you did it. Did you peel the potatoes? Yes, you peeled the potatoes. Did you say "I love you" the way you did it? Did you say this is how I'm expressing my connection and my love to you? I don't think anybody would argue to say that leaving peels all over the floor and leaving the potatoes to turn brown is a way of expressing my love and my devotion to my spouse. The same thing with any mitzvah. When we perform a mitzvah and we do it in the most beautiful way that we can do it, that shows our devotion, our love, our connection to Hashem. And yes, it is harder. It is harder because nobody sees it. And in fact, that's one of the challenges. And sometimes people, they tell me, they say, listen, because nobody sees it, it's just, nobody knows what's inside the tefillin. I know and Hashem knows. Because nobody sees it, I don't have to be the fanciest person. I don't want people to think that I have a beautiful Megillah, they start looking at me, oh, look how special he is. I don't, a Megillah I'll get more simple, more pashut, more simple, basic. There's other reasons a Megillah is not like a mitzvah that you need to wear every day. There's other, reasons why that would also be permissible. But because nobody sees it, this is how I know Hashem knows that this is how I'm expressing my love to Hashem, and I'm going to get the most beautiful tefillin to wear every day. And I'm telling you, when you get those beautiful pair of tefillin, I know myself from experience. My father got me a nice pair of tefillin by my bar mitzvah, but there was nicer, and I have since then upgraded my tefillin. And every day when I wear my tefillin, I feel like I got my tefillin from one of my top Sofer that I'm buying from, Parshios. And like I tell people, sometimes we go through troubles in our lives, and one of the things that's encouraged to do is to check the tefillin, because tefillin is, so to speak, the telephone wire between us and Hashem. It's the connection. We connect to Hashem through the mitzvahs. And sometimes there could be a cut in the wire or a broken cable or something that doesn't let the energy come from us to Hashem. And so when people go through difficult times, one of the things we do is we check the tefillin to make sure everything's in order. The straps are kosher, the box is kosher, the writing is kosher. Sometimes the problem is not the tefillin. Sometimes the problem is us. We're just not we're not refined enough. We're not working on ourselves enough. We're too coarse. We need to refine ourselves. And I like to tell people, I say, listen, at least with me, I know that if I'm having an issue with anything that I don't feel like I'm connected to Hashem, I know it's not my tefillin. My tefillin are beautiful. My tefillin are Mehudar. The line is strong. The connection between me and Hashem is strong. I know it's me, that I have to work on myself. You have that feeling like, when you put on the tefillin, you just, I want to connect to Hashem. I know that I'm able to connect to Hashem, and I'm on a very, very deep and very, very strong level, because I know that my tefillin, I have the best vehicle to take me to my destination. That's what I have. And I say vehicle, but I actually do compare tefillin to a car sometimes. The Retzuos, the straps, I like to compare to let me back up. There's 3 components to the tefillin. You have the Parshios, the Batim, and the Retzuos. The Parshios, which is the text, nobody sees it. It's hidden. I like to compare that to a car, like it has an engine. The engine is under the hood. The Batim, which houses the Parshios, I compare it to the body of the car. And the Retzuos, I compare it to the tires of the car. Now, the reason why I compare it to these different components of the cars is there's a lot of comparisons. In some ways, they're the same. In many ways, they're the same. In some ways, they're not. So, how is it the same? It's when I talk about the purchasing a pair of tefillin, people ask me, they say, "Is this going to last me my entire life?" And I say, "Well, yes. If you take care of it, it will last you the entire life." And I say, I tell them it's like a car. The engine is like the Parshios. It's under the hood. It's housed inside the body of the car, just like the Parshios are inside the Batim. The engine is inside the body of the car. The body of the car and the engine will last you the life of the car. The Retzuos, however, like tires on a car, they have to be changed. Lehaavdil, like tires on a car, they have to be changed every couple of years. They don't last forever. So, and like a engine of a car, it's not just important to have good tires and a good Batim and good body. You need to make sure you have a good, powerful engine in there. And inside a pair of tefillin, a good, powerful engine, that's the Parshios. If you have Batim and Retzuos, but a Parsha inside that's puzzle, it's like having an engine in there that's dead, that doesn't do anything. The car's not going to drive. It's not going to move. So it's important to have good, Mehudar, beautiful Parshios, or rev that engine. The Parshios will stay beautiful so long as you maintain them every couple of years, get them checked, make sure that they don't age without being fixed along the way. The Batim are like the body of the car. It gets a little ding here, a little ding there, but it can be fixed, it can be worked out, and it will last the duration of the tefillin of your life. But the Retzuos have to be changed every couple of years. So that's the idea, and everybody understands the importance to have, and going back to the engine, everybody understands the importance of having a healthy and a strong engine. Give it an oil check every couple of years, and you have to do an oil change every now and then. Same thing with the Parshios, they need to be checked every now and then, just to maintain it and make sure that they are going to stay strong and going to stay beautiful. And when it comes to buying a pair of tefillin, once somebody's able to come to terms with buying a kosher pair of tefillin, which is going to be quite a bit more than you'll find in Judaica stores and gift shops and Amazon, eBay, whatever. Once you come to terms with buying your son or yourself a kosher pair of tefillin, the difference between a kosher pair of tefillin and, let's say, a beautiful pair of tefillin, it could vary between $500 and $1,000, let's say. Whatever the prices of tefillin are, the difference is between a good kosher set and a beautiful kosher set could be, let's say, $1,000. If this is a tefillin which you're buying for your son or your grandson, or even if it's a tefillin which you're buying for yourself, the lifespan for a pair of tefillin could easily be 75 years, assuming that they're taken care of properly, they're not left in the sun and cars and all those things. I see tefillin which are 70 years old all the time. I see it, and sometimes they're in good condition, sometimes they're not, but it is possible for tefillin to last that long. People wear the same tefillin from their bar mitzvah till their 80s, and Mir Tashem till 120. But let's say you're spending that extra $1,000 for 75 years of use, and if you're already 80 years old and you only have another 40 years left of your life, then that years will carry on to let's say the next generation. Children and grandchildren can inherit the tefillin. If you take that $1,000 and you spread it over 75 years, I did the math. You're looking at 27 cents a week, a little bit over $1 a month, to wear and fulfill a beautiful pair of tefillin and to fulfill the mitzvah on the most beautiful and highest level. If the upgrade only costs $500, then it's half that. I mean, put things into perspective. How many times do we buy a coffee without thinking about it? That could cover 6 months of beautiful Mehudar Tefillin. Now, if you're looking to buy a pair of tefillin for yourself, maybe to upgrade your tefillin, or perhaps you just don't have a pair of tefillin and you're looking to buy a pair of tefillin, and you understand and you appreciate and you want to buy a Mehudar pair of tefillin, but you just can't bite the bullet. You need a little push to encourage you to take the leap, so to speak, and just get yourself what you want, which is a beautiful and Mehudar pair of tefillin. If you realize this and you think about it, then the longer you push off buying the tefillin, the more it's going to cost you. The sooner you have it, the sooner you start reaping the benefits of wearing a beautiful Mehudar pair of tefillin, the cheaper, the less it's going to cost you. Okay? Because you're owning it for a longer period of time, and you can divide that cost of the, difference in the cost of the pair of tefillin over a longer period of span of time. I mean, what do we own that we can safely say will be here till our end of days? Our clothes that we wear? No. Our cars? No. Shoes? No. Appliances last a couple of years. There's not very many things that we can buy right now that we could safely say we will have this tefillin, till our end of days. Tefillin is one of them. You buy a pair of tefillin now, it will last you your entire life. So when you buy a pair of tefillin, you have to see it as not just, something that you buy now and you have to buy again next year and again next year, or you buy it now and it's going to last 3 years. This is something that you make the investment once, it will last you. Emir Hashem, take care of it, treat it with respect, treat it properly, watch my video, how to properly take care of maintaining your tefillin. You will have these tefillin for the rest of your life. And like I always tell people, I never met anybody who regretted buying a beautiful Mehudar pair of tefillin. In fact, it's the other way around. I always meet people in the supermarket here or there, say, oh, I just got my tefillin checked. Sofer said they were beautiful. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity of fulfilling a mitzvah on the most beautiful Mehudar level. Who on their deathbed says, oh my, why did I spend money on the tefillin to buy a Mehudar pair of tefillin? Why did I do that? I don't think anybody does that. So when we think about what's important in life and what we're able to spend our money on, the tefillin is definitely one of those things which should definitely, take a top priority in our lives. Now, with that being said, this is all nice and beautiful, but not everybody is able to afford a beautiful, beautiful tefillin. So what do you do? What should I do? I don't have the money to buy a beautiful pair of tefillin. Batim are important. Like so I say the example of a car. You need to have the tires, you need to have good Retzuos. You need to have good Batim, you need to have good body of the car. And you need to have a good engine. What am I supposed to do if I can't afford it? So what I tell people is, and I'll tell you on the video, is rather spend more money to get properly written, like a good, even a baseline, like a good basic kosher parsha. Rather get that, a good quality parsha, and get a very basic batim, and basic Retzuos. Now, the reason why I say this is because if you're going for a very basic parsha, like when I go with a cheap, I'll say cheap. When you're looking to buy a cheap parsha, there is so much that can go wrong. Like I showed you in the examples, the letters touching, the letters missing this, the letters misshapen, and all that. All you need is one little imperfection to make the entire tefillin not kosher. And don't kid yourself, that parsha is going to cost you, even if you buy an inexpensive pair of tefillin, it's going to cost you a couple $100s. Now, the difference between a inexpensive and a more expensive box, it's either one is going to be kosher, okay? Just one is better made. One is a more Mehudar. But even the basic box, it's still a kosher box. It's just not well made. It's not echad. It's not Mehudar. It's not beautiful, but it's kosher. You know that it's kosher. There's no skeletons in the closet. Versus a cheap parsha, it's like a fortune cookie. You don't even know what you're getting because it could be so terribly written that it could be puzzle outright. So let's say, for example, you have only. I'm just going to use this number, okay? And these are not real numbers. I'm just because this video will be on YouTube for many years in Mirza Hashem. Let's say you can get a pair of tefillin, let's say for $800, okay? You can get a pair of tefillin for $800. Now, let's say you could do it a couple of different ways. You can get Batim. Let's say you can get Batim, which are $400. You could get Retzuos. Let's say you get Gases Batim for $400. You could get Retzuos, let's say for $100. And that leaves $300 for the Parshios. So you got good Batim, Gases Batim. You got okay Retzuos, good Retzuos for $100. But only left $300 for the Parshios. What do you think you're getting for the Parshios? You're getting what I showed you in the photo, earlier in the video. So now you come down the road a couple of years, you get the tefillin checked, and they say, your tefillin are not kosher. You need new Parshios. Well, what do new Parshios cost? Well, good Parshios cost $650, let's say. Okay, you're going to spend $650. You're going to get good kosher Parshios. Two things happen. One, you were wearing non-kosher tefillin for that whole duration of period of time. The second thing will happen is you threw away $300. If you take a different approach, and this is the one that I'm suggesting you take now, and this is what I do with people all the time, if you only have a limited amount of resources, don't spend $300-400 on Batim. Take the $300-400, spend it on the Parshios. Get $600 Parshios. Get $150 Batim. Get the Pshutais. Those Batim are much, much cheaper. They're $150. But spend the extra money that you have, spend it on Parshios. Get nice Parshios. You know what? You'll have good kosher tefillin the entire duration of period of time. Should you want to upgrade the Batim in a couple of years down the road, you didn't throw away $300. You invested $150, and the Batim are still kosher. You can gift them to a friend. You can give them to a rabbi. Do you know somebody who needs a pair of basic kosher Batim? And you can go then and buy yourself $400 Batim if you're ready and able to do that now. So now you always had good Parshios. You always had a kosher Batim, and you always end up with a kosher pair of tefillin. Versus, I see people say, I had somebody mailed me a pair of tefillin. Okay, this is 2 weeks ago. I'm still dealing with it right now. The guy got a pair of tefillin. Again, this is 2023. We're in January now. He bought a pair of tefillin from a website. That's not important where, it doesn't matter. Ar Echad Gases for $739. Gases Batim. And he emailed me saying that he noticed a couple of cracks in the Batim. Can I fix it? He sent me pictures. I said, yeah, sure, I can fix it. The tefillin came, and I sent him an email. I said, when he sent me the tefillin, or he didn't tell me where he bought them. It was like I'm telling you what I found out after. I'll tell you the story. He basically gave me the tefillin. I said, when I got them, I said to him, do you want me to just fix the Batim, or do you want me also to check the Parshios? I had no idea when he bought them, where he bought them. I had no idea. So I said, well, if you're working on it already, just check the Parshios also. So I opened them up, and they were chalashos. They were broken letters, this, that. Baruch Hashem, they ended up being kosher, but they were like, I basically emailed him and I said, like, you know, I'm okay with you using these tefillin, but only like as a last resource if you have nothing else. Like, I really don't feel good about these tefillin. And he emailed me back saying how, you know, he had just bought them and he was so disappointed. And he sent me a screenshot of the receipt. He spent $739 on it. And these are gases. There was problems with the Batim also. Whatever, we're middle of working on it right now. There was problems with the Parshios, problems with the Batim, you know, because he wanted me to fix the paint. So I scraped off the paint and I saw that they patched things with glue and it wasn't done right at all. So they weren't even good gases. But, you know, imagine that he had good gases, but the Parshios are halushes, you know, like really, really problematic. So if he would have spent the same $739 or whatever, even a little bit more, but got cheaper Batim and better Parshios, he would be in a much better situation right now. So, like, don't make that mistake that a lot of people make. You know, it's nice to say, oh, I have gasos or echad. You know, actually, maybe I will put a screenshot from this order without the name. I will do this. I'll put in the screen the screenshot that he sent me of the tefillin. You'll see the description. It looks like such a beautiful pair of tefillin, but the price is a giveaway because we know Batim cost. We know a good Parshios cost. You know, it happens to be. By the way, what I'm suggesting, putting beautiful tefillin, like not good tefillin, in weak Batim. A lot of Sofer, they laugh at me. They say, "What are you doing? Put good Parshios in gases, and you put cheap Parshios inside cheap Batim." But again, I don't hold to that because I don't hold of cheap Parshios. Cheap Parshios, by me, cheap Parshios are 99% of the time puzzle. So, you know, you have to be smart about it and make an educated decision, and that's what I'm trying to help you with in this video. Now, I want to say one last thing, and I'll finish with this. I don't even know how long this video is going to be, but I'm assuming it's going to be very long. How do you know what's a good price? You know, I avoided saying prices for the most part as much as possible in this video because I know prices are going to change, and somebody might watch this video and 10 years from now, the prices I'm saying now, they'll laugh at. They'll say, "Oh my gosh, you know, tefillin used to cost that." How do you know what's a good price for tefillin? And it is a very good question. And again, that's why you have to trust the person where you're buying the tefillin from. I'll say this till I'm blue in the face. You must absolutely have complete trust and faith in the person you're buying the tefillin from. You know, sometimes I have people, they'll text me a picture of a parsha. You know, it happens every now and then. It doesn't. Most people don't do this. But I get a picture of a Torah or a Megillah or even a mezuzah tefillin. They'll say to me, "Is this nice? Is this worth $100? Or is this worth, you know, $30,000 for a Torah, whatever? Is this worth this?" So my answer to them is always, ask the person you're buying it from. Ask them, are you selling me a product that's worth what it's actually worth? And I say to them, and if you can't trust their answer, you shouldn't be buying from them in the first place. If you don't trust them that their price is fair, how can you trust them on anything else? Like I explained earlier in the video, you have to make sure that the parshas are written properly according to halacha, and you have to make sure that it was assembled correctly. You have to make sure, every part of it has to be, you're trusting him on every aspect of the tefillin, so why and how can you not trust him on the price aspect of the tefillin? You know, a pair of tefillin is not like any electronic item that you're looking to buy. Imagine you're looking now to buy a laptop. So you do your research, you figure out which make and which model you want to buy, and now you start looking on different websites, maybe Best Buy, maybe Amazon, maybe some other electronic website. And what you're looking for now is to find who's selling it for the best price, because you know that they're all selling the exact same item. Tefillin, on the other hand, it doesn't work like that. There's no make and model for a pair of tefillin. Every tefillin is written by a different Sofer. Perhaps maybe it has different Batim, different Retzuos, who assembled it, who checked it, and all the other things that we discussed on what makes each tefillin unique. So how can you buy a tefillin based on price? You can't price shop tefillin from one vendor to the next. You have to know exactly how is this tefillin made, what Parshios, what Batim, which Retzuos. To price shop a pair of tefillin doesn't make any sense because there are so many different ways that the tefillin can be made that can affect the price of the tefillin. From one tefillin to the next could be night and day. So I hope that this video was enlightening, and I hope that I shed a lot of light, and I hope I gave you a lot of ideas and food for thought that when you're buying this pair of tefillin, that you're able to make the right decision, the correct decision. If you do need any personal attention, again, my phone number is right here behind me. Call me, email me, WhatsApp me. if I could help you fulfill this mitzvah of tefillin in the most beautiful way, or in whichever way you prefer, in a way that's acceptable in halacha, it'll be my absolute pleasure to be able to assist you with this beautiful mitzvah. And if you are looking to purchase Batim, Retzuos, or Tefillin, or a complete set, you can find the links in the description to my other videos where I have a detailed explanation on what there is to buy and what you need to know before you buy a tefillin, as well as links to my website where you can submit an order online. And if I can help you with this beautiful mitzvah of tefillin, it'll be my absolute pleasure to help you. So again, if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe. If you like this video, give the video a thumbs up, and I'll see you on my next video. Another video coming out real soon, and stay tuned.